Mounting violence in Mali. A coalition of rebels and armed groups has carried out another series of assaults, highlighting the military government's failure to contain the attacks. With the junta under increasing pressure, how will it address this growing security threat? This is Inside Story. Hey there, I'm Scott McLean. When Mali's military took power in a coup 5 years ago, it pledged stability. But for Malians, that promise has not been fulfilled. Over the weekend, rebels and armed groups carried out a joint offensive in the northern and central parts of the country. The coordinated attacks echoed those in April, when the same coalition seized control of a major city and killed the defense minister. For more than a decade, Mali has been grappling to contain armed groups operating in the Sahel. After accusing French troops of failing to improve security, the military government turned to Russia for help. But little seems to have changed. Instead, Mali has become increasingly volatile, and the junta is losing swaths of land to rebels and armed groups. So what are the consequences of this violence? We'll talk to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
Tuareg rebels roll into the town of Anifis in northern Mali as part of a wave of attacks across the country. They also targeted the towns of Aguelhok and Gao in the north, Savere in central Mali, and Kanirobe in the south. Here, rebels are reportedly shown capturing soldiers, and here, shooting down a Russian helicopter. The attacks were carried out by the Tuareg separatist Azawad Liberation Front, or FLA, in coordination with the Al-Qaeda-linked armed group JNIM. The Malian army says it killed 26 fighters, and the situation is now under control. But the assaults come after the JNIM armed group and the FLA carried out the largest attack in Mali in almost a decade in April. They captured the strategic northern town of Kidal, along with most of the surrounding region, and killed the defense minister.
I am addressing you at this extremely serious moment. These complex, coordinated and simultaneous attacks targeted the towns of Bamako, Kati, Kona, Mopti, Gao and Kidal. A national effort is essential today, and we must all stand united against division and social fragmentation.
Russian paramilitaries in the Kidal area withdrew. Russian-backed groups have been supporting the military government that took power after coups in 2020 and 2021. Before April, the Tuareg rebels and JNIM had fought each other. These attacks were the first time they'd united.
The regime will fall sooner or later. Faced with the FLA offensive to retake the territory of Azawad on one side and the offensive by the others in Bamako and other cities, they will not be able to hold out.
The JNIM has since blocked routes to Bamako, disrupting supply chains. While Mali is rich in gold, the population is impoverished, and the blockades and ongoing fighting made the economic situation worse. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
All right, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Abuja is Kabir Adamu, the Managing Director of Beacon Security and Intelligence. In London, we have Nadina Ronc, an independent geopolitical and security analyst. A university affiliated to U.S. Special Operations Command recently published her research into Russia's Africa Corps. And Bram Posthumus is a political and economic analyst who specializes in West Africa and the Sahel region. He joins us from The Hague. Thank you all so much for being here. Nadina, I want to start with you. 5 years ago, when Assimi Goïta, the president of Mali, took power in a coup, he promised stability. And yet, here we are, 2026, the violence rages on. Why has it been so hard in Mali to restore order?
Look, Africa Corps was built to meet strategic and diplomatic interests of the Russian government. It was not built to bring peace or retain peace in the country or any country where it operates. So you have basically Russia operating where it is where it has its strategic interests. The strategic interest is firstly protecting the military juntas because they have invited the Russians to help them retain power. And then you have also mineral resources which Russia takes back to Russia to prop up its illegal Ukrainian war. And so you have a large part of the country that is left without any defense mechanism in place. And it allows for these sort of Al-Qaeda linked networks to operate. And therefore, you cannot retain peace and security in the country. And it also it brings no positive outcome or any good life for the local Malians in the country.
All right, I just want to give our viewers a bit of background on the armed rebel groups that are fighting right now inside of Mali. So the Azawad Liberation Front and the armed group Jumat Nusrat al-Islam al-Muslimin, or JNIM, are aligned against Mali's military government, but they were not always on the same side. Tuareg rebels have been fighting for more than a decade for an independent north. The Azawad Liberation Front, or FLA, was formed in 2024. JNIM is aligned with Al-Qaeda and was formed in 2017 as a coalition of armed groups. It aims to capture territory and expel what it considers to be Western influence. In 2015, the UN brokered a peace deal between Tuareg rebels and Mali's president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, but he was deposed by the military, and the deal was formally scrapped in 2024. So, Kabir, can you just give us a sense of the map right now? I mean, how much of Mali right now, realistically, does the Malian government actually control, and how much functionally is being controlled by these other groups?
So essentially, Bamako is under the control of the Malian government with the support of the Russian Africa Corps. However, outside Bamako, especially on the northern part, central and southern parts, a significant portion of those locations are controlled by either JNIM or FLA. There are instances of contestation between the two groups in parts of central and southern Mali, but essentially they dominate and control those locations.
Bram, the government is down to its last real footholds in the Kidal region in the northeastern part of the country. This is also the part of the country that the Tuareg rebels would very much like to have as part of their independent state one day. And I just wonder, if the government and the Russian forces were to lose that foothold of power there, is it only a matter of time before the path of least resistance says, okay, FLA, you can have it?
Well, we've been here before. It was only less than a decade ago when the precursor to the now Azawad Liberation Front also declared Azawad to be an independent state. And that didn't work out very well either. So the chances of this organization, the FLA, actually establishing an independent Azawad is quite remote, even if they would be able to physically occupy the whole area that they consider to be that state Azawad. And mind you, they represent the Tuareg part of the population. It's not the only part of the population in that part of Mali. We've got Songhai, we've got Bala, we've got Arabs, we've got Fulani, we've got all kinds of different peoples living in these areas, and they do not necessarily agree with a state that would then be imposed on them, run by Tuaregs. So, realistically speaking, there is not a great deal of a chance of this actually materializing.
Kabir, I'm interested in this coalition between JNIM and the FLA. They don't have the same goals. One wants an Islamic empire, one wants a separate state for its own ethnic group. And I just wonder, sure, it's convenient right now because they are united in their opposition to the Malian government. But at what point? I mean, is it only a matter of time before these groups turn their guns on each other, or do you think they can sort of coexist?
So, I mean, they've coexisted for a while, and what appears to be the case now is that they've reached some form of agreement out of convenience. They are facing, so to speak, the same enemy. They are able to support each other strategically in terms of tactical training, weapon acquisition. So it's convenient for them to cooperate, and it appears, based on the agreement that they've reached, each side would maintain distinct ideology and sort of profiling. And so for as long as that remains, it looks like they are going to continue to cooperate, and that convergence may materialize into something bigger. And I think the major challenge is as long as the current sort of structure that the Malian government has maintained remains, it will allow them to continue to cooperate and win more support, especially from communities that have not seen much of government presence over the last few years.
Nadina, do you agree with that, or do you think that it's only a matter of time before these two groups are fighting each other as well?
Oh, I'm sure it is. I think as other countries have shown us the example that at some point there will be something that they will all argue over. Power is aphrodisiac, as they say. So I don't see there being much of a peaceful situation going forward. But I do believe that these groups do have a capacity to overthrow the current military regimes in the country.
Bram, as JNIM grows in territory and influence, they have to recruit fighters on the way. And I just wonder, are they recruiting fighters by force, or are they also, winning hearts and minds along the way, as we saw, ISIS do to some extent through their propaganda campaign?
It's not that difficult to recruit young men mainly who have very little in the way of economic prospects in the places where they live, and who are already born and raised in a society that is by the vast majority steeped in the Muslim faith. So in that sense, there is already a spiritual connection between, the deprived part of the population and those who are coming in to spread their version of Islam. So there is one connection there. And the other thing is, these are operations that by and large pay for themselves. The various jihadist groups feed themselves off illegal gold mining, cattle rustling, all kinds of roadblocks improvised, which fleece passengers of their goods and their monies. So there is really no shortage of actual money to distribute. And obviously you can entice young men who have nothing to do, who are sitting in their village waiting for something to come along, and say, join us and we'll pay you. That's a pretty enticing prospect. So recruitment is not really a major issue here.
Kabir, you heard Nadina say a moment ago that she thinks... Yeah, please, Nadina,
May
go
I
ahead.
just add to that, please? I agree that the recruitment is not an issue, but you see, you have a situation where Malian soldiers and Africa Corps are attacking locals who are protecting, for instance, the mineral areas, and there have been reports of rapes as well. So it is not by force that they are recruiting them. Many of these people actually want to join because they're fed up of Russia's presence and they want them gone.
That's an interesting point, to sort of send a message to the Russians there. Kabir, you heard Nadina say a moment ago that she thinks there's a possibility that the government could be toppled, but I wonder, is JNIM really in a position to also govern the country if it were to topple the government?
So that's what JNIM is trying to project. But the reality is that its ability to govern such a large strategic country like Mali is deficient at the moment. But let's not forget that they have models sort of to copy from Afghanistan and more recently Syria. And so that may have boosted their sort of confidence in the fact that they believe they can do it. But in terms of the reality, there's a lot for them to learn in terms of their ability. And some of the points that were mentioned by my co-discussants regarding their recruitment style, I think it is very important. We've seen the use of force. We've seen them conscripting unwilling individuals. But over time, they've sort of relaxed, and they are preaching a more sort of pliable mechanism, presenting themselves as a viable option to the autocratic system that the government is currently running. And so they are learning, and I think along the way they will continue to project that. But the reality is that there is a lot that would be required to govern such a strategic country like Mali that they don't have.
Nadina, where are these rebel groups getting their weaponry from? Is it just a matter of, as Bram says, sort of stealing and pillaging, or if you overtake a military base or you boot out some Russians, you take their military hardware as well? Or are there outside forces who are helping to fund some of this as well?
Well, as you saw, they used the drones in April, and drones which were basic drones they bought through China. They have then sort of arranged them or fixed them to operate in a way that they can be used to attack other forces. So there is combination of what they buy and what they freely take over from, for instance, from Africa Corps.
Kabir, you've heard the Malian government complain that Algeria has been meddling in its internal affairs. Does Algeria have a role in this conflict at all? Do they have any interest in Mali right now?
So yes, I mean, given the geographical location of Mali, most of its neighbors will be very interested in the outcome of the current conflict there. So naturally, Algeria is interested, and it would want an outcome that would be favorable to it. So clearly, the allegations regarding its meddling is rooted in the fact that it would want an outcome that is favorable, and that outcome would be one that perhaps is not where we don't see a partition that allows a non-state actor that it would not be favorable to it. How that is playing out is a bit unclear. AU has attempted to intervene severally. It has maintained a very strict stance on democratic transition. It has maintained the suspension of that country. So the allegation is definitely rooted in the fact that Algeria would be interested in an outcome that would be favorable to its foreign policy objectives.
Bram, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you lived in Mali at a time pre-2021 when French troops were there to try to provide some security for the country. Assimi Goïta, the military leader, now the president, when he took power in his coup in 2021, he booted the French forces and brought in these Russian mercenaries instead. In your view, was that a mistake?
My goodness, that's an interesting question, because on the one hand, the French came in on the back of a victory, an early victory in 2013 over the incursive jihadist forces, and then decided to stay and change their operations into what many Malians considered an occupying force, the famous Operation Barkhane, which just didn't lead to the successes that were promised. So in a sense, there is some logic to assuming that, okay, if this partner doesn't deliver the success and the results that we want, we look for another. On the other hand, there have been traditionally long ties between the former Soviet Union and the Malian state. Mali has always been buying Soviet kits since time immemorial, and there have been personal links, especially between the Minister of Defense, the now slain Minister of Defense, Sadio Camara, and the leadership in Russia. So in that sense, there was quite a logical outcome. Was it wise? Absolutely not, because we know the reputation of first Wagner, not only in Mali, but elsewhere as well, and indeed its successor, the Africa Corps. They're not very successful. They're extremely ruthless. They're hyper-violent, and they rain terror on the population. So obviously, the defeat of the purpose was built in from the start.
Nadina, this is your area of expertise, these Russian mercenary groups. Obviously, Mali has a lot of mineral wealth. It has the third largest gold reserves under the ground right now in Africa. It has other kind of minerals in large quantities as well that have yet to be exploited. Most of the mines there are owned by Canadians or Australians or Chinese companies. Obviously, the government is taking a cut as well. But help us understand what's in this for Russia. Why does Russia want to have these troops there?
Basically, Russia is how Russia operates. It has tried this even in the Western Balkans. It is to create a problem for the Western countries, Western forces, NATO, and the EU. So it has gone into Sahel mainly for the resources, not for the security reasons. The resources are taken back to Russia, as I said earlier, to prop up their illegal war in Ukraine, and therefore it is just to spread Russian interests and to continue to keep up with the resources policy in the region. I mean, they have moved. I think they operated in Sudan for a bit, and then when the war started there, they moved out because it was not strategically viable for them. They could not afford to take so much of their military there, who are not really, as I said, who are not there to protect and keep the peace, but they're there for Russia's and Kremlin's self-interest.
Kabir, can you help us understand how much of this conflict comes down to ethnic lines? And if there is ethnicity that plays an outsized role in all this, and if JNIM is not primarily associated to one ethnic group or another, does that kind of limit its possible reach when it comes to recruiting new fighters, taking over new territories?
So yes, essentially, JNIM presents itself as an ideological non-state actor that is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, as an example. And its recruitment style is similar to the recruitment style of other ideological non-state armed groups in the Sahel. A combination of forced conscription, a combination of ideological attempts to win the hearts and minds of the people, and then, of course, taking advantage of the massive land space that you have that is relatively undergoverned across Mali. We also know that it has received, in terms of support and membership from other jihadists within the Sahel region, so not just Malians, but others. In terms of ethnic profile, it's a combination of several. But just like was mentioned earlier by one of the persons, within the Malian territory, you have several other ethnic groups. The FLA is essentially Tuareg movement, and part of its, of course, political objective is to carve out a territory for the Tuaregs. So within that space, ethnicity does play a huge role. But then in terms of the structuring of the two groups, one service presents itself as JNIM as more of an ideological group movement, while the FLA clearly presents itself as a Tuareg liberation sort of group. And of course, at the end of the day, what matters for both of them is whether they will be able to achieve their objectives, and territorial control is the primary aspect of that objective. So that perhaps may be the point where there will be friction at some point in the future. But for now, like I said earlier on, they are cooperating, they are coexisting, and we've seen a convergence to achieve a mutual objective, as it were, which is to make the government look weak and establish political dominance.
Bram, in 2015, there was a deal struck in Algiers that basically made a deal with the Tuareg separatist groups to say, look, these rebel fighters, we're going to integrate them into the regular army. In exchange, your region will get greater autonomy. That was torn up by Assimi Goïta in 2024. I wonder, A, was that a mistake? And B, is there any chance that a similar deal or a slightly different deal could be renegotiated that may suit both parties, or has the ship sailed?
It wasn't a mistake, it was inevitable, because the Malian army has a particular beef with any Tuareg-dominated rebel movement, and that's called Aguelhok. And Aguelhok was the place where a large number of Malian soldiers were killed by Tuareg rebels, quite recently, actually, in the 2010s. And the definition of their actions in the north of Mali has always been under the flag of revenge. We need to revenge our comrades, our brothers in arms, who have been killed by these Tuareg rebels. And you will notice in the terminology that when Assimi Goïta and his junta are referring to terrorists, they mean the Tuaregs, they mean the rebels, and they mean the ones who killed our mates. So in that sense, tearing up the Algiers Accord was absolutely inevitable. The return of any other form of the Tuareg rebel movement, now in the form of the FLA, was equally inevitable, for the simple reason that there is no way that the Malian armed forces are able to control that part of the country, partly because of lack of knowledge of the terrain, and partly because they're also seen as an occupying force from the south, and they're not particularly welcome there. So all in all, these developments were inevitable, and it's playing out exactly as the way it should. When Kidal fell to the Malian army in the end of 2023, if memory serves, the consensus was the Tuareg rebels will be back, and they got back even earlier than most of us thought.
Nadina, Western governments, particularly the United States, have spent untold amounts of money in the Middle East fighting against groups like Al-Qaeda in the Middle East. Obviously, JNIM is affiliated to Al-Qaeda, but I don't hear any alarm bells sounding in Western capitals right now. I don't hear a lot of panic and urgency about this situation. Should there be more of that?
Yes, I do think that there should be more, but you're right that there isn't. I think there are various things going in the background. You see, if I can say this, France and the US, they managed to push back these terror groups when France and the US were present in the region. When Russia came in, they opened the doors to them to come in and to spread their wings, if you like. But I think that now there is a lot of talk and not enough action in what is the appropriate form of action to do. You can go in militarily, but you are creating a bigger problems for the NATO southern flank then. Or you can try and offer economic leverages to these states, or even try and to find countries that are not so easy with Russia's presence and try and work with them. But there is a lot of it that looks and sounds good on paper, but in practice it hasn't actually shifted, and it really must do so very, very soon.
Kabir, I saw you shaking your head there, but unfortunately we have run out of time, so we got to leave it there. Thank you all so much for being here. Our guests, Kabir Adamu, Nadina Ronc, and Bram Posthumus. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it for me, Scott McLean, and the team here in Doha. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment. Stay tuned.